So hello everybody and welcome to the second lesson of this course. In this lesson right here, as we said in the ending of the first lesson, we're going to focus on frame rates and resolution. We're going to discuss everything that is when it comes to frame rates, right? All the different frame rates, 60 frames per second, 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, all the way to 120 and 240 frames per second. And then we're going to analyze what a resolution is, from 720p to 1080p, 2.7K, 4K, all the differences between them, the pros and the cons. So without any further ado, let's launch this presentation and let's dive into frame rates and resolution. So obviously we're going to start by analyzing the frame rates. So let's go. Now, let's first discuss what a frame rate is. Keep in mind that, as you can see in this image right here, a video is pretty much multiple photos played at high speed. That high speed of the photos that are played to make a video range from 24 frames per second, which is pretty much the bare minimum of a frame rate. All right, anything less than 24 frames per second, as we can see in the next slides, will look jitterish and glitchy, up to more than 20,000 frames per second. 20,000 frames per second is a frame rate that usually slow motion cameras use from. Now, it all comes down to the anatomy of the human eye. As we said, the human eye views the world at 24 frames per second, and anything below 24 frames per second will look glitchy, jittery, let's say laggy. So the bare minimum amount of photos for a camera to shoot per second to construct a video is 24. That being said, there are many frame rates from which to choose from. We have 24 frames per second, which is the normal speed of most cameras. Most cameras also shoot at 30 and 60 frames per second, and some cameras that are able and capable to shoot at slow motion speeds shoot at 120 or even 240 frames per second. Now, what is the magic here? If we shoot a video at 60 frames per second, you will see that if we do the calculus, we can have 2 times a video of 24 frames per second played during those 60 frames per second. This means that if we slow the video down by 50%, so if we slow the video down by 2 times, it will play at 30 frames per second. So this means that if we shoot a video at 60 frames per second, we can actually apply a slow motion effect. We can slow it down by 2 times. Respectively, if we have a video of shot in 120 frames per second, we can slow it down 5 times. And if we have a video shot at 240 frames per second, we can slow it down up to 10 times. So this is pretty much how the slow motion effect is applied in modern videography. It is all based on the frame rates in which your video is shot. To give you an example, in this image right here, you can see this drop of water dropping, which is shot at very slow motion speeds, so very high frame rates. This is probably shot from more than 240 frames per second. This is why we were able to slow it down, obviously more than 10 times in post-production. So this is a great example of a high frame rate video slowed down to 24 frames per second, so it will slow down more than 10 times. Most of the cameras shoot anywhere from 24 to 120 frames per second. This is the frame rate of your iPhone or Android phone. In general, if you have a smartphone, you can usually shoot up to 120 frames per second. A DSLR also, in DSLRs the same principles apply. You can shoot anywhere from 24 to 120 frames per second. And if you have a slow motion specific professional camera, you can shoot anywhere from 24 to, again, 20,000 frames per second. These are specific cameras that are made and constructed to shoot very slow motion videos. But keep in mind that up to recent years, most of the cameras couldn't shoot more than 60 frames per second. So the fact that you have the capability to shoot video at 120 frames per second from your smartphone and slow this down 5 times, this is very important and very useful, and we're going to use it in this class right here. Now, question: why shouldn't I be always shooting at the highest frame rate available? You would ask yourself, okay, my smartphone shoots at 120 frames per second. Why are we having this lecture? Why should I know about all the different frame rates to be a complete videographer? Why shouldn't I always shoot at 120 frames per second? Well, there's a catch here. Frame rates obviously have pros and cons. Obviously, videos that are shot at high frame rates can be slowed down even more in post-production. This is why we shoot at high frame rates, to apply the slow motion effect in post-production. In addition to that, videos that are shot at high frame rates have, in general, as a rule of thumb, a more sharp image. So this increases also the clarity of the image. Now, this is the devastating parts. There are some cons when it comes to high frame rates. The first con is that high frame rates eat the battery of your camera very, very fastly. So of course, this is very battery consuming. Shooting at high frame rates usually occupies a huge space and of the computing power of your camera and your smartphone. So keep in mind that high frame rates will drip your battery up. In addition to that, high frame rates produce huge video files, very, very big video files, which obviously will increase the needs of your storage of your phone and of your camera. So this means that if you shoot at high frame rates, be prepared to have to deal with huge files, and this is going to be a pain in the ass also in the post-production of your video clips. So you need to be targeted when shooting at high frame rates. You don't have to shoot all of your videos at the highest frame rate possible, but we're going to discuss about the perfect golden line of frame rates. In my opinion, the perfect frame rate to shoot are 60 frames per second. While shooting at 60 frames per second, you're giving the chance to slow down by 2 times your video, so we can apply 2 times slow motion in our video, 50% slow motion, and this is the perfect fine line, in my opinion, between battery and storage consumption, in addition to, again, this chance for us to apply the slow motion effect. So, if I were you, with my smartphone, I would shoot at 60 frames per second constantly. This was everything that there was to be taught about frame rates. Obviously, we didn't dig that deep into frame rates, but we now have covered the basics, and we can move to the second part of this lecture, which is the resolution. So let's go. Now, in general, resolution as a rule of thumb is the amount of pixels that construct your image. Low resolutions will obviously include less amount of pixels in the image, and this will lead to a more blurry image. Higher resolutions will obviously have more pixels in the image, and the P that you can see after those numbers, 240p, 360p, 480p, 720p, 1080p, those are pixels. When we refer to an HD video, we are talking about a video that is of resolution of 1080 and above. Above 1080 we have 2.7K, 4K, but we're going to discuss about the other resolutions right now. Now, which cameras shoot which types of resolutions? Literally anything less than 1080p was pretty ancient in the times of videography. Those very old cameras used to shoot at 720p, but the bare minimum of resolution nowadays is 1080p. And 1080p, you would see most of the DSLR cameras shooting at 1080p, the low-range DSLR cameras, also phones, obviously shoot at Full HD 1080p. Then we get 2.7K, which is my preference of resolution. Obviously, most phones, again, are capable of shooting at 2.7K. GoPros are capable of shooting at 2.7K, obviously some higher-end cameras. And then we have the very well-known 4K resolution, which most phones, most cameras, most GoPros nowadays also shoot at 4K. Obviously, we have resolutions higher than 4K, 5K, 6K. Some phones also shoot at 8K at the moment. Now, this is a very good question. Why shouldn't I be always shooting at the highest resolution? I bought my phone because it has the ability to shoot 4K video. Why shouldn't I be always shooting at 4K? The answer, just like in frame rates, is the fact that we have both pros and cons in resolution, just like in anything in life. Increased resolution will come with some pros. Obviously, we're going to have increased quality of video. We're also going to have increased sharpness and clarity. The videos will be looking great. But the problem is, again, that this consumes a huge amount of battery, and again, this greatly increases the amount of storage that you're going to need for your videos. These, again, high resolution files are going to be very, very big files when it comes to storage. So this pretty much brings me to my next point, which is the suggested resolution. Now, my suggested resolution, the best resolution in my opinion out of all of those that we analyzed in this lesson, is 2.7K. 2.7K, again, brings great video quality in your videos, and it doesn't consume that much battery as well as storage space. We could say that 2.7K is the fine line between video quality and battery and storage consumption. So 2.7K is my suggested resolution for you. So if we combine the suggested frame rate and the suggested resolution, we have the so-called killer combo, which is 2.7K at 60 frames per second. This is what I would suggest you to shoot with your smartphone at a daily basis. I would suggest you to shoot 2.7K video at 60 frames per second. This means that we have a decent resolution with, again, an increased amount of pixels, so we have that quality and clarity of image in addition to sharpness, and 60 frames per second, which means that we can slow down the video up to 2 times in post-production. This is also known as 2.7K 60, and it is a very, very common combination in videography. So this is it when it comes to frame rates and resolution. Just to recap this lecture right here, we started by analyzing what frame rates are, the different types of frame rates, the pros and cons while using high frame rates in your videos, and then we moved into resolution. We analyzed different types of resolution, anywhere from 720p to Full HD, 4K, 2.7K, and all of that stuff, and then we analyzed the pros and the cons of shooting again in high resolutions. Then we concluded into the killer combination of frame rate and resolution, which is 2.7K again at 60 frames per second. Now that we're done with the basic anatomy and function of your smartphone video camera, it is time to move into actually the different types of video shoots that we can achieve again with those amazing smartphones. So in the next lesson, we're going to discuss about camera moves that will make your videos more interesting. So see you.